A peculiar revelation. Ambassador James Reese stepped off the spacecraft onto the alien world of Xylox, ready to open a new chapter in human-Xyloxian relations. The purple hues of the foreign sky gave him pause as he adjusted his envirosol to the atmosphere. He was greeted by a delegation of robed Xyloxians, their insectoid features clicking and chirping in excitement. High Priest Zilar, draped in black and yellow robes, approached James with reverence. "Welcome, Ambassador Reese. We are honored by your presence and the gifts you bring from Earth," Zilar said, eyeing the large crate being unloaded from the ship. "I come with an offering of goodwill from humanity. A selection of our finest artisanal cheeses," James proclaimed, opening the crate to reveal a dazzling array of cheese wheels and wedges. The Xyloxians let out a collective gasp, their antennae quivering with anticipation. Zilar reached out a trembling appendage and gently touched a wheel of aged cheddar. "The sacred substance, here before us. The legends are true," Zilar whispered. "Humanity has truly been blessed with divine powers." James was taken aback. He had not expected such a profound reaction to a simple dairy product. As the Xyloxians began to chant and prostrate themselves before the cheese crate, he realized this diplomatic mission had taken an unexpected turn. The Xyloxians insisted on a grand ceremony to welcome the cheese, parading the crate through the streets of their capital city. Throngs of aliens gathered to catch a glimpse, overcome with emotion at the sight of the earthly delicacies. James was perplexed but also intrigued. He had stumbled upon a civilization that held cheese as a sacred substance, revered above all else. He knew he must tread carefully to understand and respect their beliefs while still advancing human interests. As he witnessed the Xyloxians' pure joy and devotion, James couldn't help but marvel at the power of cheese, a food he had always taken for granted, to unite two disparate civilizations in an unexpected way. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test his diplomacy skills and forever change the course of human-Xyloxian relations. The cheese had opened a door to a strange new world, and James was determined to see where it would lead. Origin of the cheese cult. Gathered in the grand hall of the Xyloxian capital, James Reese listened intently as High Priest Zilar recounted the history of their civilization's first fateful encounter with cheese from Earth. "Many cycles ago, a human explorer crashed upon our world. Injured and alone, she was discovered by our ancestors," Zilar began, his voice trembling with emotion. "Despite their differences, our ancestors nursed the explorer back to health. In gratitude, she shared with them a treasure from her homeland, a substance unlike anything they had ever encountered." The hall fell silent as Zilar unveiled a small ancient box. With great reverence, he opened it to reveal a small withered piece of cheese. "This is the original sample gifted to us by the explorer, preserved for generations. It was our first taste of the divine, a revelation that forever altered the course of our history." James stared at the ancient cheese, amazed by its significance to the Xyloxians. Zilar continued his tale, describing how the explorer taught their ancestors the secrets of cheese-making before returning to the stars. "In her honor, our ancestors founded the cult of cheese, dedicating themselves to the creation and worship of this sacred food. They spent generations perfecting their craft, but could never quite replicate the divine flavors of Earth cheese." Zilar turned to James, his compound eyes shimmering with hope. "And now, with your arrival, and the gift of authentic human cheese, we can finally fulfill our sacred duty and bring the true taste of the divine to our people." As the hall erupted in joyous chants and celebration, James couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The Xyloxians' obsession with cheese seemed to border on fanaticism. He wondered if he had inadvertently disrupted the delicate balance of their society by reintroducing them to real Earth cheese. Zilar must have sensed his apprehension. He placed a reassuring appendage on James' shoulder. "Fear not, Ambassador. You have brought us a great blessing. Together, we shall usher in a new era of cheese enlightenment for all Xyloxians." James nodded, determined to navigate this strange new world and its cheese-worshipping ways. He had a feeling that his mission was about to become far more complicated than a simple trade negotiation. As the celebration continued around him, James couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the precipice of something momentous, a cheese-fueled journey that would test his resolve and forever intertwine the fates of two very different civilizations. Interplanetary tensions. News of the Xyloxians' reverence for cheese spread quickly through the galaxy, and demand for Earth's dairy products skyrocketed overnight. Gourmet fromageries from Paris to New York were inundated with orders from the alien civilization, straining their production capacities to the limit. Back on Xylox, James Reese found himself in the middle of an escalating crisis. High Priest Zillar and the cheese cult leadership were demanding ever-increasing shipments of rare and exotic cheeses, insisting that it was vital to the spiritual well-being of their people. Ambassador, you must understand. Now that our people have tasted the true divine cheese of Earth, they cannot go back to the inferior replicas we have made do with for so long, Zillar pleaded, his antennae twitching with agitation. James rubbed his temples, trying to find a diplomatic solution. High Priest, I understand your people's devotion, but Earth's cheesemakers simply cannot keep up with the demand. We risk destabilizing our own economy to satisfy your cravings. Zillar's compound eyes narrowed. You would deny us this sacred sustenance. After all we have done to welcome you and your people. The tension in the room was palpable. James knew he had to tread carefully. Perhaps we can find a compromise. Earth can provide a steady supply of our most revered cheeses, but in return, we ask that Xylox share its advanced propulsion technology with us. Zillar chittered in agitation, his robes fluttering. You would trade the divine for mere machines. The cheese cult cannot abide this blasphemy. James stood his ground, locking eyes with the High Priest. If the cheese is truly divine, then surely the gods would want it to be shared in the spirit of cooperation and mutual benefit. For a long moment, the two stared each other down, the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance. Finally, Zillar lowered his gaze. I must consult with the cult council, but know this, Ambassador. The Xyloxians will not be denied their birthright. One way or another, the cheese must flow. With that ominous warning, the High Priest swept out of the room, leaving James alone with his thoughts. He knew he was walking a tightrope, trying to balance the needs of two very different cultures. As he gazed out at the alien skyline, a sense of foreboding washed over him. The chess game of interplanetary diplomacy had taken a dangerous turn, and he couldn't help but feel that the endgame was fast approaching. James steeled himself for the challenges ahead, knowing that the fate of billions hinged on his ability to navigate this treacherous new landscape. The cheese had brought them together, but it could just as easily tear them apart. The cheese riot. Tensions reached a breaking point when rumors began to circulate among the Xyloxians of a shipment of rare and exotic new Earth cheeses arriving on the planet. Whispers of Roquefort, Stilton, and Gorgonzola spread like wildfire, igniting a frenzy among the cheese-worshipping masses. Crowds of Xyloxians from all walks of life began to gather outside the capital city's spaceport, eagerly awaiting the arrival of the legendary cheeses. The mood was electric with anticipation and reverence. James Reese watched the growing throngs with mounting concern. He had tried to keep the shipment under wraps, fearing just such a reaction. Now, as he saw the teeming masses of agitated Xyloxians, he realized his worst fears were coming true. When the spacecraft carrying the precious cargo finally touched down, the crowd surged forward, overwhelming the security forces. James could only watch in horror as the scene devolved into chaos. Xyloxians clambered over each other, desperate to get their appendages on the sacred cheeses. Fights broke out as different factions argued over which cheese was the most divine. The Stilton is the true king of cheeses, one group chanted, waving wheels of the pungent blue cheese. Heresy. Roquefort is the only path to enlightenment. Another faction countered, brandishing wedges of the French sheep's milk cheese. The riot quickly spread beyond the spaceport, engulfing the capital city in a maelstrom of cheese-fueled chaos. Shops were looted, effigies of rival cheeses were burned, and the streets ran yellow with melted gorgonzola. James realized he had to act fast before the situation spiraled out of control. He activated his emergency beacon, summoning a rapid response team from Earth. As he waited anxiously for backup, James couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of the situation. Here he was, a diplomat trained in interplanetary relations, embroiled in a riot over fermented milk. It was almost enough to make him laugh if the stakes weren't so high. When the Earth reinforcements finally arrived, they found a city in chaos. Xyloxians ran amok, their devotion to cheese turned to madness. It took hours of intense negotiations and judicious application of riot control fondue to finally quell the uprising. As the dust settled and the last embers of the cheese riot were extinguished, James knew that the balance of power had shifted. The Xyloxians' obsession with cheese had nearly torn their society apart, and it was clear that something had to change. He looked out over the scared cityscape, the scent of smoldering Gruyere still heavy in the air. The path forward would not be easy, but James was determined to find a way to bring balance to this strange new world he found himself in. The cheese had brought them to the brink of disaster, but perhaps, with wisdom and compassion, it could also be the key to a brighter future for both their worlds. Resolution and a new era. In the aftermath of the Great Cheese Riot, James Reese found himself in a delicate dance of diplomacy, working tirelessly to bridge the gap between the Xyloxians' devotion and the realities of intergalactic trade. After weeks of intense negotiations, a breakthrough was finally reached. Earth agreed to a new trade deal, one that would provide a steady and sustainable supply of a diverse array of cheeses to the Xyloxian people. In return, the Xyloxians would share their advanced propulsion technology, opening up new frontiers for human exploration and commerce. It was a win-win situation, a testament to the power of diplomacy and mutual understanding. To celebrate the historic agreement, a grand festival was held in the capital city. Xyloxians and humans alike came together to sample an array of Earth's finest cheeses, from the nutty depths of Parmesan to the creamy tang of Chèvre. As James watched the festivities unfold, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Against all odds, he had helped to bring two disparate cultures together, united by a shared love of one of the galaxy's most unlikely treasures. High Priest Zilar approached James, his compound eyes glinting with newfound wisdom. "Ambassador, I must thank you. You have shown us that true enlightenment lies not in blind worship, but in understanding and appreciation." James smiled, nodding in agreement. "It's a lesson we can all learn from, High Priest. Diversity and openness are the keys to growth, whether in the world of cheese or the world at large." As the festival continued into the night, James couldn't help but reflect on the strange journey that had brought him to this moment. He had come to Xylox expecting a simple trade mission, but had found himself at the center of a cultural and spiritual upheaval. Through it all, he had learned valuable lessons about the power of food to bring people together, to bridge even the widest of gaps. The cheese had been a catalyst for change, a reminder that even the smallest things could have profound impacts on the course of history. As he looked out over the sea of celebrants, humans and Xyloxians alike, James knew that a new era had dawned, one of cooperation, understanding, and a shared love for the simple joys of life. The Great Cheese Riot would go down in history as a turning point, a moment when two cultures found common ground in the most unlikely of places. And as James raised a glass of sparkling champagne, he knew that he had played a small but vital role in shaping the future of the galaxy. For wherever there was cheese, there was hope. And with hope, anything was possible.